Welcome to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts. Today, actually, it's going to be Ask the Industry Experts. I want to welcome my co-host, Dave Loverock, Vice President of ICE Ltd. Dave, welcome aboard.
How you doing?
I'm great.
Another day at the office.
Well, but your office is changing locations, I understand.
We're just moving up the road a little bit. Seem to be growing rapidly again, and even in the slow times, it's busy.
Yeah. So, Dave, let's bring the topic on board here. What we want to discuss, and that's about inlays and logos, and bring it forward to what it is, what it has been, where it came from, where it's going to, and all the proper processes and maintenance and everything that the industry audience wants to know.
Yeah, not a problem. Right? It's a fairly in-depth subject. There's 100 different ways people have been doing it over the years, and it goes back somewhere. I started back, and I ran into a gentleman back in the late 70s, a gentleman at Maple Leaf Gardens. George Flagler was his name, and he was a sign painter. Like, he did truck lettering with an actual paintbrush, and away it'd go and paint the sides of trucks, and he'd make signs, hand-painted signs, and that's what people did. It was freehand, and that's the way they set it up. And he showed up one day at Maple Leaf Gardens, and he had a magic marker on a stick, and he'd start with drawing out a rough letter around the circle. And I think it was, if I can remember correctly, it was Victorian Order of Nurses, or I remember Canadian Cancer Society, support the Canadian Cancer Society. It was just simple lettering around the circle. And he would start off of the center and work one side of the red line and work the other side of the red line until he got it fit into it like a 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock position. And then out would come a 2-inch paintbrush or a 3-inch paintbrush, and he would just freehand the letters. It truly was a work of art. And that was the first time I saw a real sign painter do on ice paintings. And the quality that it was, and because he had experience doing it, the end product was incredible. I was in awe. Now, the technology's changed and things change, and you can still paint stuff freehand on the ice, and some people still do it. Our friend Eddie Peduto at the Burbank Arena still does freehand stuff on the ice, and it's just a one-off thing. It goes in for a couple of days, and it can be anything from support the figure skating club, something like a Rib Fest, October 3rd to the 5th, and it's for promotion, and it's people that actually show some enthusiasm or are caring about what's happening in their building to go ahead and do something like a freehand logo. But things changed over a period of time, and logos started to get bigger and more detailed, and people wanted the maple leaf and on the ice, and it used to be just this little center ice circle in the old Maple Leaf Gardens, but they started getting them bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden the Montreal Canadiens had their bigger logo, and the Boston Bruins wanted a bigger logo. So what eventually happened was the paper pounce logo, and it came out of the sign industry. And it was really quite a simple thing. It was just a piece of craft paper or butcher paper, and it had the drawing on it, and it was perforated. Right. Now, what they did was, originally when we first started doing these, we'd take an overhead projector, take the artwork, put it on a transparency, set it on the overhead projector, tape the paper to the wall, and then with a ladder, climb up on a ladder and draw it all out with a magic marker. It was a painful process.
Wow.
Because some of these logos at that time were 10, 15 feet high, or long ones that went across the blue lines. Season's Greetings was a very popular one, and it ran between the blue line and the red line with Seasons, and then Greetings at the end of it. And it was like a script, the easy flow, and it was easy to put down. And we produced, I'd probably say a couple of hundred of them at the time. And they were very popular, just little holly berries at the end, and people would drop them in at the end of November, and they'd take them out after the new year. But paper pounce and paint for probably 20 years was the standard of the entire industry in for arenas.
And how things have changed due to technology, where you guys were hand-free from this individual, George Flagler. I mean, talk about someone that has a technique and the skill set. But like you said, Dave, an artist. I mean, could you imagine if technology wasn't in play today, how many people would be able to do what that individual did going back to the early 70s?
It actually sometimes it almost like they were artists. They really were to a certain degree, and I've seen some of the people that did stuff that were like eagles and things that were true. They were real artists, and they did it. But the simple process of drawing a perfect S or a perfect O, just with a paintbrush, was always amazing. But technology changed a lot of this, and ever since we came out with the first, I guess they were the Gerber for lettering. For the first signage, there were little Gerber 12-inch, 18-inch, and they were letter cutters, and they would cut stuff out. It's just the simple XY axis plotter or printers. Well, as the plotters came out, we could now run this paper through a plotter, draw the artwork out on it, and away you go. Now,
right.
And then all you do is take the 4-inch craft paper, tile it together, tape it up, pounce the holes through it, burn holes through it. And that's how it's done. And then you have your logo there. And it's the nice part about it is that paper pounce logo stuck with the industry right up until till the inkjet printers came out.
Right. So let's talk about present then. Let's talk about with the audience that will be listening to this podcast, Dave. What are their choices when it comes to logos, branding of the sheet of ice?
Well, there's really only 3 types of logos out there right now. There's still the pounce and paint one. I'm surprised that people still buy them, and it's a great way because you buy one logo and you pounce the logo, and then you roll up it away and you bring it out next year and you pounce it again and paint it, and you want 3 logos on the ice. Or if you got a town community, the town of Aurora has a pounce logo, and they do around the circle at each one of the rings, so it says Town of Aurora. The other one is the text mesh logos. They came in a while back when I think the first printer started to get larger, and the large printers were probably the SciTech ones that did 4 and 5 meter logos, and they were mesh, and they're fairly popular in the industry. It's a relatively inexpensive way to paint, and it's done on a vinyl material that's perforated, and it's printed and it looks good, and you can put it in the ice. There are issues with the color of the vinyl, but we found that sometimes you get a different color of whiteness to it, and some of them they've added blue to the vinyl, so it gives it a whiter appearance. And the last one out would be the textile logos, which are a fabric logo, and they're usually dye sublimated, and sometimes they're printed. And dye sublimation is the next generation of textile logos. They're fast, easy to put in, and they don't have some of the troublesome characteristics of vinyl mesh.
Right. What kind of material is that printed on, Dave? Like what kind of fabric?
It's on a polyester fabric. It's treated in a specific way to absorb a dye. So it's taken from the women's millinery industry. It's fairly popular, and anything that's dyed is permanent. Whereas if you print something, it can be damaged or destroyed by scraped. And we sell the plastic mesh vinyl logos to the curling industry. You're not driving a 9,000-pound Zamboni over top of them. You don't have to worry about them breaking away. And the air entrainment issue is one of the issues that you have with mesh, because they're very hard to get to lay flat. But they all fit a marketplace, and they all fit a price. And that's really what it boils down to.
Sure. What about size? I mean, let's talk about size. What's available for the audience that they can actually, based on their design of their facility, the layout of their pad, what size can they work with?
Well, because of the way that you can tile these large format, we have a 5 meters, 16-foot wide printer, and it knocks off a vinyl mesh, and we use it for the curling industry. We've done a couple things at the Rockefeller Center for the elections, for the Kerry and Bush over the last few years, and they had continental United States on it, and you'd print the states out and drop them on top, red or blue, and that was I think about 140 feet by probably 65 feet, 60 feet high.
Wow.
If you give me, there's no size restriction. It's just a matter of tiling the pieces together. But most logos that are put in the ice for hockey arenas run about 100 square feet. Sometimes, if you look at the NHL, if you take a look at their neutral zone logos, they are held hostage to 81 square feet. Now,
is that stipulated by the NHL, Dave?
That's stipulated by the NHL. And there's other stipulations too that the NHL has on where you place them, what you do with them, the colors you can use. Like obviously, you wouldn't want a large black logo at face-off spots because it makes it hard to see the puck. But in most cases, the logos, like if you're going to put something around the outside circle, try to make it big. Try to make it big. 30-inch lettering is not unusual if you're fitting stuff around a circle. You get down to that 10 and 12-inch logos. It might seem like it's large, but it's not really, because you're covering your ice surface is what, 16,232 square feet. So if you say a 10 by 10 logo, it's only 100 square feet of that entire area. So you can. We don't like to overload an ice sheet, but if you keep the logos in that 180 to about 120 square foot in the neutral zone, you're pretty close to where you want to be.
Sure. So let me ask you, Dave, customers thinking about putting logos in, how in depth is Jet Ice as far as providing this kind of information when it comes to detail, comes to placement? Maybe you can share with the audience.
Yeah, actually, we actually do we do a whole layout for you. We make recommendations. We say, okay, this is what you should use, approximate sizes. You know, you'll have the odd character that comes in and says, I want a logo 5 by 5. Well, it doesn't make any sense. It's like a postage stamp. But the real truth of the matter is you're branding. You're putting something in the ice, whether it's advertising or the figure skating club or the hockey team, you're branding a given product. And some people pay for it, and some people pay a premium for it. I know that if you take a look at the standard people that know branding, it's IBM, it's Canon, it's Remax, and they're big, they're bold, and they're simple. And you really want to keep logos as simple as possible, because the more detail you put into a logo, the easier it is to get the detail get lost in the ice sheet. Like the Remax one I use as a reference, because you'll have the individual that's a Remax real estate agent. He wants his photo, he wants his car number, he wants his fax number, and he wants the umbrella with the little kid floating away and the balloon at the very end of it. That's not really what it's about, because nobody's stopping to get his phone number on the ice. They're it's the branding. It's Remax. That's all it has to be. Keep it simple, keep it clean. And if you do use paint, it's so much easier to paint a Nike swoosh than it is to even write the words Nike, and everybody knows them. That's branding at its best.
I've heard that before.
Yep.
Nice. So where about when it comes to once you've recommended design based on what they're looking for, where do they put it?
There's a number of places. You always take into account what your facility's like. If you have seating going up, always follow the rake of the seat so that don't put them too close to the boards. The NHL recommends at least 12 at the bottom of the logo, at least 12 feet off the boards, so the visibility is there. And I always stay away from hockey markings. You don't want any conflict there. And in most cases, you try and make sure that whatever you're setting up on your sheet is well laid out visually. I sometimes take the logos out, lay them on the ice, then go up on the stands or wherever I am and look out and see, okay, that's about where I want them. Because you can sometimes misplace logos by measuring them. As silly as that sounds, it's visual impact of the logos. Okay, right about there. Yeah, that's good. Check your measurements and make sure you're square. All of our logos come with registration marks. Top and bottom, left and right. So when you put the logos in the ice, you just run a piece of thread down the ice, measure off the boards, whatever that measurement you want it to be, 15 feet, 20 feet, wherever you want them, and then tack the thread in and put the logos in on that thread on the registration mark to make sure they're straight. Nothing worse than a crooked logo.
Well, that's where I was going to go next when we talk about installation, Dave. So, looking back at the 1970 Ontario arenas, we speak of Ontario and other provinces and even in the US that were
Yep.
built in that era. They're not stadium facilities. They don't have the ability to go up higher than the actual rink level to look down at it. So how do you recommend to those type of customers that are looking to put inlays, logos in to be able to place them in the proper location?
Always face the customer. Always face the customer. And even some arenas, the older style arenas that have viewing from the end, it's sometimes not a bad idea to put the logos across the blue line, because that's where your viewing audience is. The hockey players very seldom look at the logos. You can ask them after the game, what were the logos? None of them know what it is. They're playing hockey. They don't care about what's on the ice.
If they're looking at the logos, they're missing the shot. No question. So let's talk about installation now, Dave. What can you share with the audience as far as installation?
Well, installation is slightly different with each one of the logo, but the Pounce one is the one that takes a little bit of time, but it's really quite simple. It's a piece of craft paper with the holes perforated in it with the artwork drawn, and you lay out the logo. You make sure you're square with your placement, and then you sweep chalk with a light dust mop over top of the paper, and then lift up the logo. And there's your whole drawing in blue dot. That's a matter of mixing up your paint and going out and painting it. But that's one of the reasons why we recommend keep them simple and keep them clean. You can paint a logo if it doesn't have a lot of detail in 15, 20 minutes. We did Bud Light, Bud Ice, Canon. Keep it simple. And it doesn't take too long. And you seal it in and start building ice. Now, vinyl mesh is slightly different because it's vinyl. And both vinyl and textile, I like to warn people off the top that these pieces of material are slippery. Don't step on them unless they're bonded into the ice.
Right.
Now, vinyl mesh we do for curling clubs, the big 12-foot houses. You take the logo, and all of a sudden what you do is you put water underneath it, find your placement, put water underneath it, drop the logo down, squeegee it out, lift the logo up on the other side, put water down, drop the logo on top, squeegee it out. So the logo is actually going into a wet. And the water that comes up through the perforations is what holds the logo in place. And then from there, you just start building ice. Build it slowly at start so that it gets that bond through the plastic to hold it in place. But once you've got it held in place, you can hammer it with a load of water.
Right.
Textile logos are slightly different. Find your position on them, soak them out with water, and you just use a squeegee, a light foam squeegee, or a roller, and roll the logos down, ensuring that you get all the air out when you put them down into the ice.
Sure. So that's 5 different types of inlays, logos that are offered through Jet Ice Limited. What do I choose? I mean, what would you recommend?
The preference is really, I sell paint, but we also sell other versions of logos. Optically, the best one is paint, but you have to be careful what you're doing because you have to have staff that are trained in the operations of putting ice logos in. They have to have some sort of common sense, and you always have to be leery about taking a gallon of paint out on the ice. To paint a logo. But if your logos are simple, like I said earlier, be it a Canon or Remax or IBM, they're easy to paint. You can knock off a logo in 10 minutes, slide the template over to the other side, pounce it again, paint another one. You've got 2 logos. When you go to textile or mesh, you have to buy one logo for here, and you have to buy another logo for the other side. That's the real difference between them. My preference is, no matter what anybody says, paint always looks better. Because it is a mass color that you're putting on the ice. It's really, and the mesh is mesh. It's 30% of it's a whole. So you've got white coming through on a given color. So that the color will never be as good as paint. And even in the textile, which is an actual fabric that is dyed, it still doesn't have that brilliance or the brightness of paint. It's good, but if you put 2 side by side, you can see the difference. It's noticeable. But most people don't do that. They just buy a textile logo, drop it in the ice, away they go. That looks great. They don't really have a comparison. If you take a look at, I hate to use this one, but Nassau Coliseum or Chicago Blackhawks, they still paint their center ice logo.
Yeah, you and I had that conversation a couple weeks ago as far as Danny Ahern. I saw his video of his inlay of his center ice logo, the Blackhawk. And I didn't realize until I saw that video that those guys were painting it. And I'll tell you, wow, did that look sharp.
Yeah, you know what? That's the old guys. Danny's been around forever, and he knows. That's why he drags it. And they spend a fair bit of money doing that logo because the feathers on the head, green, yellow, red, orange. There's a fair bit of paint that comes involved in that. The paint, they just drag it out every year. I don't think he's bought paint for a couple of years, but they pull out the paint another logo. And they drag that over to I think they've taken it over to install it at the practice rink.
Right.
If you're buying a center ice logo, you're looking at $5 approximately a square foot, 900 square feet. Yeah, you're up there in price.
Sure.
$4 grand anyways, depending on the size of it. So your cost gets fairly high, and if you're buying one textile here, one textile there, the cost continues to increase. Whereas your pounce one, you drop the pounce pattern down, then paint it, take the pounce pattern over, paint another one. Your only cost of the paint, and it does look better.
Right. So that leads me to a question I got asked, Dave, because whether you're spending a lot of money on paint or the inlays or the logo or the mesh or the vinyl, whatever the case may be, here's the question I have for you. Where do I put that in at? At what part of the ice build do I install that stuff at?
I think that I have to go with the industry standard. And you look at the industry standard, and they say 1.5 inches ice. I like the white down on that first 1/8 to 1/4 inch of ice. Then I like to build up 1/8 to 1/4 on top of that. So that would put me at about 1/2 inch. Add my lines and circles, and at that point I would add my my logos.
Okay.
So I'm at about 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to carry another inch ice on top of that.
Right, if you're carrying 1.5 inches. Now,
so I've separated the two out.
Right. So if somebody wanted to carry, using the math here, because you're talking about 1 inch of ice over top of lines, logos, and all that at 1.5 inches. So if I wanted to carry 1.25 inches, are you saying that I should be putting my inlays and logos at 1/4 inch then, or still at 1/2?
Yep. I would say if you're carrying 1.25 inches and you're comfortable with that, I would say you'd put everything in at about 1/4 inch. It really depends on how good your driver is.
Well, that's another topic, but important. What I want to talk about next, that's great information, by the way, for the audience to understand where to put that logo inlay, vinyl mesh. But the next part is about removal and how to remove it and install. And if you want to put an inlay or paint something in during the season, what do you recommend? How do they operate? The operator, what should they be doing to make sure they're putting it at the right level?
The funny part about it is we're right now in the middle of doing something at a major facility where they've put lettering around the circle, and they found out that they want to change the name. So it's really done quite simply, and I think the Zamboni turning radius is 28 feet. Am I right there or wrong? Close?
On the 500 model, it's 19. On the 400 model, it's 14.
14 feet, sorry, yeah, 28 for the, okay. And so what you can do is you can hop onto the circle this is really a simple one. Hop onto the circle, and you keep your blade just about where your blue circle is at center ice, and just slowly lower your blade and start driving around, and you start cutting down. And then what they're going to do is they're going to cut down around that circle, get it all cut down, and they're going to simply cut down till they get close to the other logo. Then they're going to white it out and place another logo on top of it. The new changeover, they're going to have to white it up, but put the other one on top. But in most cases, if you just want to change out a logo or put one in while your ice is already installed, I'm a big fan of the laser leveler. And if you know where your logos are at that 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, the laser level will tell you exactly where they are. And it makes it so much easier when you do this. Your blade's, I think, 77 inches wide.
Correct.
And your logo's in the ice, and it's between the red line and the blue line. So you pick up, you take your Zam out, you adjust your blade so you got a fairly good cut on it, and then you drive over top of that logo, and it might take a double wide cut. So you've got 77 and 77. So you've got a good 8 foot, 10 foot cut, both sides. Mm-hmm. And if you've got the laser level, it'll cut to where you're really close to that logo. And then you can white it out, or you can actually pull it out of the ice if you get close enough to it.
And how's that process work, Dave? Share with the audience.
And pulling the logos out of the ice, I actually fill up the hot water, go out and dump the hot water in the cut.
Yeah.
Dump the hot water in the cut. Give it about 10 minutes. Come back, grab a corner of the logo, and just pull it out. Sure. It's really easy to do. And then if you want to put another one in, clean that mess up with a 2 or 3 cuts on top of it, because you've still got that 1/8 to 1/4 inch ice on top, and the laser level tells you how far that white is down, because you'll know you're on the floor. It makes it so much easier when you use that. It's a great tool. And then just white it out, put your other logo in, and build your ice back up.
So I'm going to go to an example here, because a lot of curling associations use arenas as their site, and you have bonspiels and things like that going on. At a hockey arena, you never see face-off dots and everything, but you see a lot of the hacks and the dots and everything for curling. How does that all work? Maybe you can share with the audience how to.
Well, curling is actually, I think it comes up every couple of years. We call it the Olympic sport. Everybody wants to go to the Olympics. Well, I'm going to be a curler and go to the Olympics.
There you go.
And so the real part is people wanted to curl on hockey rinks. The real tough part about curling is you have to have a level sheet of ice, and it has to be perfectly level. You can't have a fishbowl arena where you're throwing a rock down the ice and all of a sudden it gets halfway to the house and it starts to come back at you, because as the speed of the rock dictates how far it goes, the levelness of the ice also dictates the direction. So in curling clubs, and when you have a curling sheet on a hockey rink, it's not about, I'm big fan of the laser leveler on this one, because it doesn't take long. Most of these sheets are flat to start with. And so if you've got a laser leveler and you've got curling, you just go out, do your regular pattern cut, and then put a flood on top of it, and you're ready to go. Once it tightens up, you're ready to go. Well, put a pebble on it, and then you're off to the races.
And you're off to the races. I have to tell you, Darren, I think it's Darren St. Clair out of the Highland Golf and Country Club in London, who sets up bonspiels and everything, Southwestern Ontario, and he knows me because I was a member at the Highland at one time. He knows that I train and sell and deal with level ice laser system. Anytime there's a bonspiel that he knows is coming up, he'll call me and say, "Do you have a level ice laser system in there?"
It saves you a lot of time. I don't know how many. The problem is people don't realize how long it takes to freeze water. And if you're starting with a sheet that's out a 1/2 inch, it can take forever to get a level sheet before you want to put your circles and your strings and your ribbons and your hog lines down, because you want to put them on a level point, then build a little bit of ice over top of it, just for the curling aspect.
Sure. So we've got the textile, the mesh, the vinyl, whatever tool that we're using for inlays. We've removed it. Let's talk about storage. What's the proper SOP for storage for your tools?
Well, each of them has a slightly different requirement. I'm a big fan of making sure that when you put stuff away, you can reuse it. And some people don't. We're dependent on people that want to have to reorder. But pounce logos are simple. It's a piece of craft paper. You've pounced it with chalk. Take it off the ice. Don't get it wet. Sweep the chalk off of it. Roll it up. Put it back in the tube, and it's good for next year or the next time you need a logo and that logo in the ice. And as long as you've done that, you're good. Mesh is a little bit different. When you pull them out of the ice, sometimes they might get a little stretches in them. Might get a little warts in it, might have a little wobble in it, or a sort of a hump in it. I say before you put it away, I'll lay it down on a piece of concrete floor if you've got a fold or a buckle in it, or where someone's yanked on it, you got the fist marks right in the vinyl. just take a hair dryer to it and get a block of wood in your hand and go over the vinyl mesh and the block of the wood at the same time to flatten out any creases you've got in it, because you don't want creases in that mesh. It's horrible stuff to get out. So you reverse roll it when you put it away. Make sure they're dry when you put them away. You don't want to open up and find they've got mold all over them. Reverse roll it so that when you pull it back out next year to put it in the ice, it doesn't roll up on you. It sort of bends down towards the ice. So it makes it easier to put in. Textiles altogether different. They're a great choice on logos. The nice part about textiles, when you take them out of the ice, you hang them over the boards, let them drip dry. If you've got anything on them, you can toss them in the washing machine, clean them up, just a little bit of detergent. But if you want to put them away properly, and the best way is to take the logo when they're wet, lay them down on a clean piece of concrete, and with the soft foam squeegees, squeegee the water out of them, let them lay there flat, and they'll dry. Then pick them up, roll them up, put them in the tube. That's all there is to it.
Nice, nice. That's great information, Dave. I tell you, I've been around arenas not as long as you, but some people even ask me sometimes, and I say, go talk to the master, Mr. Loverock.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Dave, that's a great topic, a great subject. I hope our audience gets a lot out of inlays and logos.
Okay.
I know that we have other topics coming up about Ask the Zamboni expert, or Ask the industry expert, ICE Ltd. We've covered off, as I said, logos. I think we're going to be doing our next segment, Dave, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to do the science of ice. If it's not that,
I think that's the next coming up in next month, I think, and we'll be off and running.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Dave, thanks again for your time. Greatly appreciated. And folks,
always a pleasure, guys.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, a book of knowledge. I don't know if people know, maybe a lot do, but this man has been around the industry a lot longer than I have. I think I was still in high school and he started the industry. Sorry, Dave, but showing your
no problems at all, guys.
Anyways, I want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts podcast. If you have a question for one of our experts or an idea for a future episode, please email your questions or requests to info@zamboni.com. For more information and additional podcast episodes, please visit zamboni.com/podcast or search Ask the Zamboni Experts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. This is Marty Elliott, your host, my co-host Dave Loverock from ICE Ltd. Wishing you an ice day.